What kind of profound psychological fragmentation must exist in a person who feels compelled to repeatedly mock law enforcement, not just with their actions, but with cryptic, self-aggrandizing letters, seemingly viewing the entire investigation as a personal intellectual game? We're going to dissect the chilling correspondence, the meticulously planned attacks, and the baffling ciphers left behind to uncover the hidden motivation landscape of a killer obsessed with control and notoriety, a journey that reveals disturbing patterns of a deeply disturbed mind. Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Zodiac Killer case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. The very first crime attributed to the Zodiac Killer instantly presents us with a compelling psychological indicator, a need for absolute power and subjugation over others. The first psychological red flag here is power and control. The initial attack occurred on the night of December 20th, 1968, in a secluded area known as Lover's Lane in California. David Faraday, a 17-year-old, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were on their first date. They had parked their car when another vehicle pulled up and blocked their exit. A man approached their car. What followed was a brutal one-sided exercise in dominance. Faraday was shot once in the head, and Betty Lou Jensen, who attempted to flee, was shot 5 times in the back. The sheer overkill, the multiple shots into an already retreating victim, suggests a complete absence of impulse control paired with an intense, unquenchable need for the victim to be completely subdued. This wasn't just murder. It was a clear display of psychopathic predatory behavior, the victims chosen seemingly at random, making their deaths less about who they were and entirely about the act of taking a life. There was no robbery, no sexual assault reported, and the motive appeared to be a thrill of the kill and the display of ultimate control over another human being's final moment. This established a pattern that would repeat. Young couples in secluded areas, world as theirs to manipulate and to terrorize. The second psychological red flag here is the obsession with recognition and grandiosity. 6 months later, on July 4, 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time at the Blue Rock Springs Golf Course parking lot. It was also in California. 22 and Michael Manu, 19, were sitting in a car when a vehicle pulled up and drove away, only to return a few minutes later. The driver got out and approached the passenger side of the car, shining a flashlight in their faces before opening fire. Fair died shortly after, and Manu survived despite being shot. What differentiates this from the first attack? From a psychological perspective, is what happened next. The killer, not content with the violence itself, called the police department dispatch 40 minutes later. He calmly provided the location of the crime and, most tellingly, confessed to the previous murders of Faraday and Jensen. This phone call is a key piece of the psychological puzzle, revealing an overwhelming need for validation and recognition. The perpetrator wasn't satisfied remaining an anonymous killer. He needed the world, and more specifically law enforcement, to know about his actions. This act of confession, while foolish from a forensic standpoint, is a classic indication of a narcissistic and grandiose personality structure. The crime is incomplete until it is acknowledged and feared. It suggests a deep-seated feeling of insignificance that would only be overcome by wielding this terrifying power over the public narrative. The third psychological red flag is the coded communication as a manifestation of intellectual superiority. In August 1969, when the first of the Zodiac's famous letters arrived at 3 different San Francisco Bay Area newspapers. These letters were not merely threats or confessions. They were complex, coded messages. Each letter contained a piece of a 408-symbol cipher, which the killer demanded to be published, threatening more murders if his demands were not met. What drives a murderer to become a puzzle maker? This indicates a profound element of a delusional intellectual superiority. The cipher became the killer's trophy, a demonstration that he was not only physically powerful, but also mentally superior to the police and the general public. This act suggests a deep-seated isolation and paranoia, when the only meaningful form of communication is a hidden one that only a select few, or only he, can truly understand. The cipher itself was quickly solved by a school teacher and his wife, revealing a rambling message that spoke of collecting slaves for the afterlife, further cementing the delusional nature of his motives. This wasn't an elaborate security measure, but an ego-driven challenge, an attempt to engage the world on his own twisted terms. The 4th psychological red flag is the need for an alias and the disassociation from self. The author of the letters demanded to be called the Zodiac, a name and symbol, a crosshair. The adoption of a distinctive and sinister moniker is a significant psychological action, moving beyond a simple alias to form a disassociation from the true self. By creating a Zodiac persona, the killer was effectively shedding his ordinary identity, allowing him to embody the ultimate terrifying power he craved. This is a classic coping mechanism for individuals engaging in extreme antisocial behavior. The real self remains normal, while the other self carries out the monstrous acts. The Zodiac persona was meticulously crafted to project an image of power, intelligence, and a cold, unfeeling detachment, further fueling his fantasy of feeling all-powerful. The symbol itself, a circle with a cross through it, visually represents a target, confirming his view of the public as his personal hunting ground. The 5th psychological red flag is the staging of the crime scenes and the desire for a spectacle. At a lake on September 27, 1969, was a terrifying escalation in the killer's psychological journey, transforming from a simple ambush to an elaborate ritualistic staging. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, college students, were picnicking near a lake when a man approached them wearing an execution-style hood with a crosshair symbol stitched into it. He also had a shirt with the same symbol on it. The killer approached them holding a gun and told them he was going to tie them up before the killing. He took out a pre-cut clothesline and forced Shepard to tie Hartnell. Then he tied Shepard. After they were tied, he stabbed them repeatedly with a long blade, an intimate and ferocious act of violence. Hartnell survived, but Shepard tragically died from her injuries. The staging of this crime, the bizarre costume, the act of tying the victims, and the intense personal nature of the stabbing indicates a significant shift towards sadistic ritualism and a need to control the narrative. The killer carved a message on Hartnell's car door, giving the date and the number of the victims. Minutes later, he called the Napa County Sheriff's Office from a payphone, reporting the crime and his involvement. The compulsion to create a spectacle and call the police immediately suggests an overriding psychological need to ensure that the unique nature of his crime was not only known but also properly recorded as his work. This is the behavior of a performance artist of violence, someone whose crimes are the means to a grand self-directed play. The 6th psychological red flag is the unpredictable victim selection as a strategy of fear. The final confirmed Zodiac murder occurred in San Francisco on October 11, 1969, a marked departure from the secluded paired victimology of the previous attacks. Paul Stein, a 29-year-old taxi driver, was shot once in the head. The killer then committed a highly unusual act, taking Stein's wallet, keys, and a piece of his bloodstained shirt. This shift to a lone working-class victim in a busy urban environment is a powerful psychological tactic, showcasing the killer's ability to adapt and maximize public anxiety. By selecting a victim whose occupation placed him in contact with countless strangers, the Zodiac effectively created a terror that could strike anyone, anywhere. The theft of the shirt piece was even more significant. The Zodiac later sent this piece of Stein's shirt to the San Francisco Chronicle, along with a letter detailing the murder, effectively using it as a gruesome, tangible proof of authenticity. This need to constantly prove his involvement points to a deep underlying insecurity and a lack of genuine self-worth, which he attempts to compensate for by demanding absolute belief in his horrific actions. The final psychological red flag here is the letter and the need for psychological dominance. After the Stein murder, the letters continued, filled with boasting, threats, and further ciphers. The most famous of these later messages, the 340-character cipher, remained unsolved for decades, a continuous source of frustration for law enforcement and a testament to the Zodiac's psychological dominance over the investigation. In a letter sent in April 1970, the Zodiac threatened a school bus full of children. The threat of indiscriminate violence against the most vulnerable is a dark escalation, a psychological move designed to inflict maximum terror and psychological control over the entire community. He didn't need to carry out the threat. The mere possibility was enough to paralyze the public. This is the ultimate expression of a mind's complete lack of empathy, viewing children and the public as mere tools to amplify his own legend. He wasn't interested in a relationship with the police based on that capture. He was interested in a relationship based on intellectual submission. The abrupt silence and the enduring mystery. The confirmed correspondence from the Zodiac essentially ceased after 1974, leading to the ultimate psychological mystery of the case, the abrupt and unexplained silence of a person so profoundly driven by recognition. Why would a killer who craved notoriety so desperately suddenly stop communicating? This silence can be analyzed through several psychological lenses. One possibility is that the external stress of the police investigation became too great, triggering a deep-seated fear of apprehension that finally outweighed the need for recognition. Another is that the Zodiac moved on to another form of gratification, a different outlet for his grandiose fantasies, or perhaps relocated to a new environment where he could resume his pattern without detection. A third, more psychologically complex possibility is that the killer achieved the ultimate satisfaction from his campaign of terror. Creation of the legend itself, the unsolved ciphers, and the enduring fear he had instilled became sufficient evidence of his superiority. His goal wasn't just to kill, it was to become an idea, an entity of pure terror. The lack of resolution in the case, the mystery that continues to captivate, is the final lasting psychological victory, allowing him to maintain absolute control over his own narrative from the shadows. This enduring psychological impact on the collective consciousness is a testament to the power of his carefully crafted persona. The clues he left, the letters, the ciphers, the distinct symbol, were not attempts to be caught, but carefully designed mechanisms to prolong the chase and endure his lasting infamy. His entire M.O. was an elaborate psychological game of cat and mouse, where the capture was less important than the continuation of the game itself. The psychological profile emerging from these acts suggests a man driven by a profound sense of inadequacy, masked by an inflated, narcissistic self-image, and fueled by a sociopathic detachment from human emotion. The why is rooted in the overwhelming desire to matter, to have his existence validated through the fear and confusion of an entire region. So this was an interesting case, wasn't it? The Zodiac remains a mystery. We don't know who it is. There are lots of different options. I mentioned 3 of them, but the 4th one could have been he died. Maybe he died, or maybe he was arrested. Somehow he was removed from that situation. We'll never know. It's been so long now. He probably has, if he was still alive at the time, it's probably not now. And so the Zodiac Killer remains a mystery. It's full of psychological layers. Obviously, we don't know who it is, so I don't know or have the information about his childhood or about his past. So simply by observing and researching his behaviors, I was able to speculate on what type of personality he was. But definitely, he was a dangerous personality that we have to look out for. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? Do you remember this case? Maybe in the news, or maybe you read about it? Let me know. And if I missed any other elements, let me know that too, because I'm not perfect and sometimes I miss things. And I really enjoy others who may know more about this and done more research than I did. And they let me know in the comments. So I appreciate that. If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.